You can
Uh,
start. Let's start,
yeah.
Ravi.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. Today, just I'm talking about the osteoporosis update from the two guidelines I have taken. This is the one, the Indian Society for Bone and Mineral Research (ISBMR) guidelines. It is a 2021 guideline, and the other one is a pharmacological management in osteoporosis. This is from 2019 guidelines. This was last updated in 2019. Uh, coming to the osteoporosis, it is characterized by low bone mass, microarchitectural disruption, and skeletal fragility. These result in decrease in bone strength and increase in the risk of the fractures. Coming to the Indian population, the prevalence of the Indian woman is 80. Prevalence of Indian women osteoporosis is around 8 to 62 percent, whereas men older than 50 years, the prevalence rate is 8.5 to 24.6%. Coming to the awareness of the osteoporosis, it is very low in India. It is around 10 to 15%. Uh, Due to the urbanization appears to be associated with an increased prevalence of osteoporosis. This is mainly due to the sedentary lifestyle and increased indoor living and low sun exposure. These three are the main causes that urbanization prevalence of osteoporosis is little bit more. Uh, Compared to the availability of DEXA scan, DEXA scan is available around 0.26 per million in India, far below the recommended number of 10.6 per million. Uh, how many of them are diagnosed with osteoporosis and getting the treatment? Only 20% of the patients are diagnosed and get the proper treatment with osteoporosis. These are the few of the non-modifiable and modifiable risk factors for primary osteoporosis. The major non-modifiable risk factors are age, sex, ethnicity, and genetics are the and peak bone mineral density. These are the non-modifiable risk factors. Whereas the modifiable risk factors is the diet, nutrition, calcium intake, vitamin D intake, and lifestyle changes that are causing more is smoking, alcohol, and lack of exercises and use of medication. These weaken the modifiable risk factors. Coming to the few of the points, like Asian Indian women have been shown to have 5 to 15% of lower BMD than non-Asian women. Average age of menopause in Indian women is like 46.2 years, which is earlier than that of seen in non-Indian women. Coming to the post-menopause, estrogen deficiency result from menopause contributes in a significant way to the development of osteoporosis. That is the post-menopause. These are the clinical risk factors for fracture. The main risk factors are age, whether male or female, female of age more than 60 and male more than 65. History of the previous fractures and steroids therapy that more than 5 mg for use for more than 3 months, and family history of any hip fractures and low body weight, low BMI, and current history of the cigarette smoking, excessive alcohol consumption, and history of rheumatoid arthritis. Coming to the secondary osteoporosis, few of the causes like hypogonadism or premature menopause less than 40 years, and malabsorption like celiac screw should be considered in the secondary osteoporosis, and chronic liver diseases and inflammatory bowel diseases should be kept in mind. These are the clinical risk factors that we can assess in the same shown in the FRAX score that we can. I'm coming later. What is the T score and what is the Z score? T score is a standard deviation difference between the patient's BMD and that of a young adult reference population. The young adult reference population here they have taken to 30 to 49. Whereas the Z score is a comparison of the patient BMD to an age matched same age or gender and ethnic group reference population. From this we can get the T score and Z score. Coming to the diagnostic categories for osteoporosis and BMD measurement by DEXA scan, in a normal, the value of the T score is minus 0.1 standard deviation, whereas a low bone mass, which is osteopenic, the range of the value T score is minus 1 to minus 2.5 standard deviation, whereas the osteoporotic range is a T score less than or equal to minus 2.5 standard deviation. The osteoporosis range is minus 2.5. Severe or established osteoporosis is a BMD more than minus 2.5 standard deviation below the young adult female reference mean in the presence of one or more fragility fractures. This is considered as a severe osteoporosis. Coming to the diagnosis, any adult with fragility fracture should be suspected of having underlying osteoporosis. And the historical height loss of more than 4 centimeters in postmenopausal women raises the possibility of asymptomatic vertebral fractures. Individuals with persistent back pain may have underlying vertebral fractures as well. Uh, Indications. These are the main indications that we are doing the DEXA scan.
Ravi,
Yes,
what is a fragility fracture?
sir. Fragility, minor trauma also cause a fracture.
Yes. So it is a trauma which is not expected to result in a fracture.
Yes, sir.
So that is very important, because if somebody has a big injury or a big fall and have a fracture, then there is no need for considering it as a fragility fracture. So that
So
is
the word,
important.
the
Yes,
word you should use is, you should say fall from standing height.
yes, sir.
When a person is standing, he falls. Fall
Yes,
from
sir.
a standing height.
Standing
A
height.
fracture sustained by fall from a standing height
And
is
height.
called fragility fracture.
Yes,
It's
sir.
called low trauma fracture also.
Okay, sir. Uh, the main indications for DEXA scan is women of age more than 60 years, men more than 65, regardless of the clinical risk factors. And in the postmenopausal young group, younger than 60 years, and men of 50 to 64 years, when there are a concern for osteoporosis based on their clinical risk factor profile. These are the two main. And women in the postmenopausal transition is if there is any specific risk factors. The specific risk factors are low body weight, prior low trauma fracture, and high risk medications like steroids. Individuals who have had fragility fracture before the age of 50 years, and individuals with rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes mellitus, and malabsorption syndrome like celiac expo and steroid daily more than 5 mg for more than 3 months, are any individuals being considered for pharmacological therapy for osteoporosis. These are the 6 major indications that we are doing DEXA scan.
Yeah, but the important learning point is, in community, in practice, lot of postmenopausal women, perimenopausal women are all exposed to this DEXA scan, and because they go with some aches and pains, DEXA is done and misinterpreted. So unless there is a risk factor, there is no need to do this test below 60 years
60
of
years of.
age, and men probably 65 and above. So there is no need to routinely do this check. If you do that, then you will end up having a report which is difficult to interpret and execute. So that is very, very important, because you will definitely get patients with who have a DEXA scan at 40 years, 30 years, 50 years, because they've gone to a Dr. X with aches and pains,
All
right?
master health checkups now have one DEXA scan. At what extended or advanced master health checkup?
So that is to be discouraged, and patients are going to have over diagnosis and over treatment. Why
Okay.
it is important is that the therapy available for osteoporosis are far and few. Every therapy has its own disadvantages and long-term sequelae. We are not going to make a diagnosis of osteoporosis in a 50-year-old male based on your DEXA scan alone and put them on treatment forever. It is not going to be there. So we have to choose the patient who is likely to benefit from anti-osteoporosis therapy diligently. And the chance at minus 2.5 at 50 years and minus 2.5 at 65 years has got a different prognostic implications. Age itself is an independent risk factor. So a woman with minus 2.5 at 60 years is more likely to fracture than a woman at 50 years. So putting them on a bisphosphonate or some drugs on a long-term basis may have its own consequences for the bone health. So here we would like to treat number needed to treat to prevent a fracture in a 65 woman with minus 2.5 is very low in the magnitude of 10 patients or something like that. But if you are choosing 50-year-old lady with minus 2.5, you may have, because incidence of fracture itself is low, you may
Yes.
have to treat 500 women or 1000 women to prevent one fracture. So it is not economical from a health economics point of view, or we are also exposing some individual for a prolonged bone suppressive therapy, which can have long-term consequences. So that is the reason we have to really choose the patient well. Go ahead.
Coming to the lab, uh, before starting the treatment, mandatory test we do for all the patients is a complete blood test, total calcium and inorganic phosphate and alkaline phosphate. Kidney function test to know for the creatinine. Few of the drugs we have to eliminate in CKD patients. That way, and liver function test and vitamin D and parathyroid hormone and thyroid hormone. Specific test to be done and suspected of secondary osteoporosis patients. ESR should be done in few of the and the serum electrophoresis in patients with multiple myeloma. And celiac sprue disease patients, IgA tissue transglutaminase antibodies, and patients with hypogonadism check for the serum testosterone and estradiol in females. Overnight dexamethasone suppression test to suspect for the Cushing syndrome or 8 AM cortisol. For patients with diabetes, fasting blood sugar and postprandial blood glucose and HbA1c should be done in diabetes patients. These are the other rare tests we do is to check for the osteogenesis imperfecta. COL1A gene should be tested, and the others we are not going to do the in a routine practice for all those patients. Bone turnover markers. These are the dynamic parameters that reflect short-term acute changes in the bone remodeling status that are not measured by the BMD. They have no role in the diagnosis of osteoporosis. They are used in follow-up. In once the treatment has started, these markers are helpful for the follow-up. The details of these bone turnover markers I am coming in the following slides. This is other one is the screening tools. Score simple calculated osteoporosis risk estimation. It is a good sensitivity and good area under curve for predicting femoral risk osteoporosis on BMD measurement. This is one of the score. Sir, one second. Ma, class le anakal kanipistunnava. Simple calculated osteoporosis risk estimation, good sensitivity and good area under curve for predicting femoral neck osteoporosis on BMD measurements. This is the score calculation of simple calculated osteoporosis risk estimation. It is called as a score. This we can done in a routine normal OPD by all of these following 6 parameters. That is the race. Indians, women in a non-black is a score of minor +5, and rheumatoid arthritis with a score of +4. And history of the fractures. This score has a maximum of the 12 score. Out of that, wrist fracture, rib fracture, hip fracture can be considered, and age and estrogen therapy, past hormonal replacement therapy, and weight. Out of these, the value more than 6 was found to have a good sensitivity and specificity for estimating risk in Indian population. In this score.
Yeah. What is important is our patients, our standard default patient, who is a woman and who has rheumatoid arthritis, is self-selecting herself into high-risk candidate automatically. So, which we generally forget about it because of we generally scared of polypharmacy and so many issues. So, these are our patients. Almost all our patients above maybe 50 years with rheumatoid arthritis of some duration. I think we should look for osteoporosis and address that. So, because the first 2 are our patients, most of our patients.
Yes.
Most of our patients. So, we should remember that, consider osteoporosis in our patients who are above 50 and arthritis of some duration. You are not going to think of osteoporosis in somebody who is starting rheumatoid arthritis 3 months before. She is likely to have a good bone density, and if you treat it aggressively and she gets into a remission, she is not at a higher risk of rheumatoid arthritis. All these patients got into this score because of earlier days where rheumatoid arthritis is always chronic and inadequately controlled. Inadequately controlled rheumatoid arthritis is a real risk factor for osteoporosis. So, many of our patients will fall into this category, and we should be aware of this. Otherwise, we might miss and we might wake up only after a first fracture.
This is the other frac scoring that we normally routinely do in our clinical practice. In this, all the 12 parameters, the secondary osteoporosis is a patient with diabetes and or a patient who is a menopause less than 40 years should be considered secondary osteoporosis. This FRAX score assesses the 10 years fracture risk of major osteoporotic fracture of wrist, vertebral, hip, and shoulders. This is a questionnaire that we routinely do for the Indian population. These are the other scores that are seen in osteoporosis patients. That is a score what I have discussed earlier with a femoral neck BMD T score of less than minus 2.5 with a sensitivity in the neck femoral neck is 89%, whereas the specificity is coming less for all, both the hip and the femoral neck, both in this. So FRAX score, it's very better compared to all these scores. And a few of the clinical indications for initiating therapy is a postmenopausal woman with major osteoporotic fracture, and the presence of fracture is a better predictor of future fractures. And the recent fracture within the past 2 years is a good predictor of imminent fracture risk in near future. And based on the Horizon trial, it is recommended to begin treatment at least 2 weeks after the hip fracture. When the patient is still in the hospital, within the 2 weeks, we can start the treatment for osteoporosis in these patients.
Why after 2 weeks?
At least.
I mean, is there any scientific reason why we should wait for 2 weeks?
You have written
No.
at least.
At least, like before the discharge of the patient from the hospital, sir.
So there's nothing wrong if we do it before 2 weeks.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, probably the reason is sometimes hip fracture patient would be bedridden. If you are going to give a bisphosphonate, they have to be up and down.
Yeah, oral to fine. No, but I'm saying if you're giving IV bisphosphonate, we might as well give it and send them off. No, that's
Yes,
why.
yes,
sir.
I think we should.
But you know, orthopedic surgeons, when they put a hip implant, they say wait for 6 weeks. Some of them. Is there any rationale?
No, there is no rationale, and there are some studies to say that giving bisphosphonate improves the implant survival. So the things are changing, I guess, now.
Okay, because I was not aware. My aunt had a hip fracture, and I wanted to start osteoporosis treatment for her. The orthopedic surgeon said wait for 6 weeks.
It is highly individual choice, I guess.
Okay.
Coming to the summarizing, initial anti-absorptive therapy, if a patient has a vertebral fracture, clinically apparent found on a vertebral imaging, and non-vertebral fractures, hip or wrist or humerus, in an individual more than 50 years of age with a T-score of less than or equal to minus 2.5 at the femoral neck and total hip or lumbar spine measured by DEXA scan, and individual with osteopenic T-score of minus 1 to minus 2.5. With a FRAX score of 10 years, is a hip fracture is more than or equal to 3.5%, or 10 years probability of major osteoporotic related fracture more than 10.5% on DEXA scan is an indication for starting an osteoporotic treatment. And the fourth one is a patient with diabetes with the intervention threshold showed increase in the increased T-score of less than or equal to minus 2.0 at femoral neck. These are the 4 conditions like that the guidelines has mentioned. When the patient with these conditions, we can start on the osteoporotic treatment.
So these are which the Indian guidelines, is it, Ravi?
Yes, sir. This is the Indian guidelines, sir.
ISBMR.
ISBMR.
So one question I have: when we look at the T-score at the hip, are we supposed to see the femoral neck, total hip? Which one?
Normally, we used to see the femoral neck.
You should see the femoral neck.
Yes, sir.
Neck only, no?
Yes, sir.
Neck
Neck only.
Not the total hip.
No,
Not
sir.
total hip, not Watt's triangle. It is a
Yeah.
femoral neck. But they have mentioned here both slash.
Sir,
They have
R they have mentioned. Sir.
Which one?
But
Here, what they mentioned?
They have
Femoral
put
neck.
either or. They have put femoral neck.
Femoral neck or total hip.
total
So, because sometimes what happens is your femoral neck may be low, whereas total hip may be normal. So, if such a thing reading comes, then would you take the lowest? Just take the femoral neck?
Yes, femoral neck you should take, Ramesh.
Okay.
These are the fundamentals of osteoporosis management. First to check for the that is like maintain the vitamin D around more than 20 nanogram per ml. Levels of 30 to 40 nanogram per ml would be the ideal. And for patients 1,000 to 2,000 international units of daily maintenance therapy is typically required to maintain an optimal serum vitamin D levels. Higher dose of vitamin D may be necessary in obesity patients and malabsorption and older individuals. Counsel patient to maintain adequate dietary intake of calcium at least 1,000 mg per day for a woman of more than 50 years, and limit alcohol intake not to take more than 2 units per day, and stop smoking if the patients are active, and maintain active lifestyle like walking, weight bearing, and balancing exercises. Counseling on regarding the risk of falls, and maintain older mainly for the older patients to counsel regarding the risk falls. So now I'm starting the treatment plan. These are the
So 1 second before you go to treatment.
Yes, sir.
Say if you, I mean, the conventionally the bone density or the DEXA scan that you do now in clinical practice has 3 components. One
sir.
is the spine, the other is the hip, okay, and the third is the wrist. So at the spine you will take L1 to L4, right?
Yes, sir.
And the hip you will take the femoral neck.
Yes,
so what if the hip and the spine are both normal, only the wrist shows a T-score of say -3? Would you take them for treatment? Is that an indication?
Sir, only
because you've seen, no?
Yes, sir.
There's so many DEXA scans that they do spine, hip, and wrist, all the 3.
Does it mean that patient has got osteoporosis in the wrist or not?
Yes, sir. There, if it is the score is a -3, means there is osteoporosis.
And is there an increased risk of wrist fracture if he falls?
Yes, sir. There is a risk.
Patient.
Yes, sir.
But is it a strong indication to start on long-term anti-osteoporotic therapy?
No, sir. Based on only this.
Yes. So
it is not
what they have, what all this recommendation is based on the morbidity of the fractures, the life-threatening features, and what should I say, quality of life shortening features of these fractures, and cost effectiveness of the treatment. All these things were put together to design the treatment protocol. So they are not giving much importance to isolated wrist osteoporosis. Even if they fall with outstretched hand, they might have a Colles fracture, which is relatively simple, can be easily fixed, may not require long-term anti-osteoporotic therapy. So that is the consensus. So the treatment decision is based on low trauma fracture occurring either in the hip, spine, and of course they also have humerus, all are included. But the decision is taken on the major fracture, which can cause morbidity, increase in morbidity and mortality.
Dharmanand, in practice, do you do wrist? I always write BMD, hip and spine.
I don't
because
do wrist.
Each region is charged different. That's why.
I've stopped doing wrist because that adds unnecessary anxiety to the patient. I don't do.
I'm not doing. I'm writing only hip and spine because even the charge and that it won't, decide your treatment decisions anyway.
And increases the patient anxiety. They will keep on telling sir -3, -3. So they're worried. So better not to do.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So these are the osteoporotic medications that we are having. Is anti-reabsorptive agents that mainly is a bisphosphonates. In bisphosphonates, alendronate, risedronate, zoledronic is a IV form, and ibandronate. And the rank ligand inhibitors are the denosumab. And anabolic agents, parathyroid hormone are related protein analogs are the teriparatide, abaloparatide, and romosozumab. And selective estrogen receptor modulators are raloxifene, tamoxifen, and bejidoxifene. Hormonal therapies is the estrogen, and few are the progesterone, and few is the calcitonin nasal spray. And these last 3 are the leastly used nowadays. This is a calcitriol, strontium, and vitamin K, and tabolin. Coming to the recommendations, the first recommendation is a recommendation for the initial first-line therapy for individuals with prevalent vertebral fractures. For the patient with vertebral fracture, teriparatide is effective in these patients, and which should be continued for 24 months and followed by the anti-reabsorptive medicines. The second option is the patient who are not afford for the teriparatide. They can consider as a second choice is IV zoledronic acid or denosumab are also the effective options. If they don't want for the injection forms, they can last is the oral bisphosphonates can be used if patient wants to avoid injectable therapies.
So Ravi, irrespective of the BMD, if you have a patient with spinal fracture now, is the recommendation that you should consider teriparatide as your first choice?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because previously we were
Yes,
given
sir.
a choice, and previously, I mean, the last I read about teriparatide was years ago, and NICE used to come up with recommendations that it was not just based on that, but teriparatide should be reserved for those with very severe osteoporosis, that is a spinal T-score of less than minus 3.5. That used to be NICE recommendations in the past. I have not read any recommendations in the recent past. That was my days. So that's why I asked you. So current recommendation is everybody should be offered teriparatide.
Yes, sir. In 2019, the osteoporotic guidelines also they have mentioned teriparatide is the first option for the vertebral fractures.
Okay. Okay. Fine.
This second recommendation for the initial first line therapy for individuals with prevalent hip fractures.
Yeah, if it is, see, if there is a fracture already, so that means they are considered as severe irrespective of the BMD.
Mm.
So because BMD is one of the determinants of fracture. So BMD and also bone morphology and the frailty and propensity to fall, all these things contribute to the fracture. So we can consider people who have had an incident vertebral fracture as having severe osteoporosis irrespective of BMD and offer teriparatide as a first choice. That is the recent thought process.
Okay.
The second recommendation is for the patient with the prevalent hip fracture. IV zoledronic acid is the agent of choice. It is recommended that hospitalized or post-surgical patient with hip fracture be given a dose of IV zoledronic acid before being discharged from the hospital.
This is exactly what I said.
Yes, sir.
It's always valuable if we get this message across to the orthopedic surgeons.
The second option we can try is a denosumab. Is also an apt and effective choice, but it is often used after zoledronic acid. And teriparatide also last choice can be used with limited data available for the prevalent of hip fractures.
Why, Ravi, teriparatide is third in this choice, in this hip fracture? Compared to, say, in a vertebral fracture, it came first.
Yes, sir.
So why do you think teriparatide is number 3 here? We would like to have the best available drug, no?
Yes,
to bone forming drug. So why teriparatide is not offered as a first choice?
Sir, because of the one is a cost.
The cost is there for vertebral fracture also, no?
Sir. And
who wants to have another hip fracture and go and get a replacement? Cost is a bigger issue with hip actually rather than vertebrae.
And one more thing is long term we can't give this teriparatide only 24 months.
Yeah, anyway, that is true for vertebral fracture also. No? So why in hip fracture, say teriparatide does it increase or decrease the cortical bones? What is its action on cortical bone? What is its action on trabecular bone? Which bone it increases? Anybody else? Sahana, Tanmay, Debaditya? Any one of you who is listening?
So it doesn't help hip fractures like the studies have shown. It improves the vertebral fractures.
Now, there is some data on hip fracture, but the data is stronger on vertebral fracture. And also, say hip bone is not a typical trabecular bone.
Yes, sir.
So particularly the post-menopausal fractures are trabecular bone fractures. And later the fracture, it is more a cortical fracture. So the effect of teriparatide on increasing the cortical bone is low. And actually some of the studies have shown slight reduction in cortical bone density. So that is the reason teriparatide, though there is some data that it prevents a hip fracture, it is not suggested as the first choice.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes. The third recommendation is recommendation for the initial first line therapy for high risk individuals without prevalent fractures. For all those high risk individuals, we can start with the bisphosphonates are generally agent of the choice. Weekly oral or annual forms effective for compliance and ease of once in a year. And denosumab can be used. Teriparatide can be considered for some with very low BMD with less than -3.5. Risk of rebound fracture is increased if subsequent doses of denosumab are not administered in time. So regarding denosumab, I'll come later. So I have detailedly explained everything.
Sure.
And the recommendation for the initial first-line therapies for low and moderate risk cases of vertebral and non-vertebral and hip fractures is alendronate, resendronate, and zoledronic acid and denosumab. Often oral bisphosphonates are preferred in low and moderate risk cases.
Ravi, why do you not see ibandronate here? Even that is there, no? Ibandronate is
Yes, sir.
easier to take 150 mg once a month.
Yes,
Why is
sir.
it not mentioned?
Sir, ibandronate has a more effect on vertebrae only, sir. It has no data in the hip and
Exactly. Good.
the recommendations for the management of osteoporosis in CKD and those on hemodialysis patients. Bisphosphonates are contraindicated in patients with CKD of stage 4 and stage 5 are those whose glomerular filtration rates are less than 30. In those patients with CKD less than 30, we can consider denosumab is not cleared by the kidney. It can be used. Risk of hypocalcemia is high when this agent is especially in patients with stage 5 CKD and malabsorption patients. So optimal calcium intake and vitamin D status should be assessed before starting denosumab in CKD patients. This fifth recommendation for the use of hormone replacement therapy in management of osteoporosis. Although effective in increasing bone mass and prevent fracture, it is not recommended for managing osteoporosis due to high risk of cardiac events and breast cancers. This can be considered in patients with uncontrolled menopausal symptoms with osteoporosis. Coming to the meta-analysis that compared hormone replacement therapy with the placebo, it showed 30% reduction in the risk of vertebral fractures and 29% of reduction in the risk of the hip fractures. So major potential side effects with hormone replacement therapy is venous thromboembolism, strokes, MI and cancers, mostly the breast, ovarian and endometrial cancers. Dementia and urinary incontinence are the potential side effects should be considered when we are giving a hormone replacement therapies. The main benefits is the relief of the heart flushes, less diabetes and low risk of colon cancer. This is a recommendation for the use of intranasal calcitonin in the management of osteoporosis. It can be used for the temporary bone pain relief. It prevents the prevention of osteoporosis fracture is very limited and should be prescribed only in women who cannot tolerate other medications of like bisphosphonate, teriparatide, and denosumab. In those patients, we can consider as an intranasal calcitonin spray. Coming to the intranasal calcitonin, meta-analysis that compared with the placebo, 46% of reduction in the risk of vertebral fractures, but no significant effect on the reduction in the risk of hip or non-vertebral fractures. So if a patient with vertebral fractures who are not don't want to take for the other osteoporotic treatment, we can consider the calcitonin spray. And the recent study shows long-term use increase the risk of prostate and liver cancers. This is a seventh recommendation for the use of combination therapies in the management of osteoporosis. Patient with very high risk for imminent fracture risk, the use of teriparatide and denosumab has been shown to result in a greater increase in BMD as against either agent alone. So we can consider these teriparatide and denosumab combinations also. The recommendation for the use of sequential therapies in the management of osteoporosis. Teriparatide should always be followed by an anti-absorptive agent. We have to give for the 2 years treatment with teriparatide, then followed by the bisphosphonates or denosumab can be considered. Patients unresponsive to anti-reabsorptive therapy alone, treatment can be followed by a combination of teriparatide and anti-reabsorptive medicines. Treatment with denosumab, if it has to be discontinued, should be followed by bisphosphonate. Zoledronic acid or alendronate can be considered. In patients with adequate renal function, delay in denosumab therapy or lack of alternative therapy 6 months after the last dose of is associated with a rebound increase in fractures. Frequency of follow-up. Once we have started the treatment, we have to follow the patient. The first follow-up can be planned after 3 months following initiation of the therapy. In the clinical follow-up, we have to assess for the new instance of fractures, new onset or worsening of the scoliosis or kyphosis, any new onset back pain or persistent the previous back pain, and perceptible height loss should be elicited. And history of fall is predictor of future fall, and ask for possible side effects like thigh pain and jaw pain should be asked when the patients are on bisphosphonates.
In the first visit itself, is it?
Yes, sir. For all the first.
No.
Not, I think this is follow-up what you're saying.
So
First.
follow-up.
Yes, sir.
See, the follow-up after 3 months, then after that once in 6 months or once a year.
Yes, sir.
But every follow-up, you have to look at the thigh pain, but the incidence of atypical fracture after bisphosphonate occurs after at least 2 years of usage. So that the thigh pain and jaw pain are long-term follow-up questions. The immediate question is, of course, whether tolerability, compliance, ability to take. So that will be more important. And of course, if there is any incident, new fractures. A fracture occurring within 6 months of starting bisphosphonate is not considered as a failure, because most of the bisphosphonates takes at least few months for it to prevent the next fracture. So you can still continue the same drug. But if it happens after a year of treatment, then it can be considered as a potential failure and you can consider alternate drugs.
In fact, I think Fitriol alendronate, it was 2 years, no, fracture prevention.
Sir, here I'm coming, sir, that point
Okay.
also there, sir.
Okay, take.
Physical evaluation like patient height should be undertaken and check for the spinal tenderness and oral hygiene if patient on anti-reabsorptive therapy with poor dentition. Need detailed oral evaluation for the patients, those who are on bisphosphonates. This is
Ravi, why do you ask for jaw pain?
Sir, osteonecrosis of jaw is most common in patients. I mean, in patients with bisphosphonates, on long-term bisphosphonates.
Which bisphosphonate? Have you seen it with alendronate, risedronate?
No, sir.
I don't think I've seen an osteonecrosis of the jaw in 15 years. Osteonecrosis of the jaw was more described in oncology literature, where zoledronate is used more frequently every 3 months, every 6 months than in rheumatology, where it is used once a year. And the risk of osteonecrosis of the jaw, spontaneous osteonecrosis of the jaw with alendronate and risedronate are very, very small. But sometimes if patients undergo dental extraction and it's a deep dental extraction and there is a trauma to the jaw, then maybe it might precipitate. That's my understanding. Dharmanand, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. So in osteoporosis world, ONJ is not common. And so we don't generally, but with the zoledronic acid, there are few case reports. So it is essential for this oral hygiene and doing or completing all the dental procedures before we start is advisable. And there are few dental guidelines also have been issued. If they are doing any dental extraction, usually they leave a socket. So it is that secondary infection which happens in the bone can, along with bisphosphonate, can lead to ONJ. So a primary suturing of whatever, once they remove the tooth, they have to suture the mucosa so that infection doesn't reach the bone. So there are few recommendations from the dental departments are available, dental associations are available to prevent ONJ. Go ahead.
Biochemical evaluation is a estimation for serum vitamin D at 6 months interval for initial 2 to 3 visits, then after annually to maintain a vitamin D level of more than 20 nanogram per ml. Teriparatide is occasionally associated with
Ravi,
Yes, sir.
if your vitamin D levels are 26.
Yes, sir.
So what is your plan to increase it? How do you increase it? Patient wants to take daily only, doesn't want to take 60,000 once a month, once a week, and all they don't want. How will you increase? Is there any formula?
So that I don't know.
So 1000 units of vitamin D. Somebody is on 2000 units. The patient's value is say 20 or 30. You want to bring it to 40. So 1000 units will increase it by 10 nanogram after 2 to 3 weeks. So if you give another 2000 units, it will go to 40 or 50. So if your target is around close to 50, so you have to add 2000 more. So 1000 units per day over the next few weeks, increase the value by 10 nanograms. So that is the like a popular formula for replacing vitamin D.
Coming to the teriparatide, it is occasionally associated with hypercalcemia. Serum calcium can be measured at least 12 hours after administration of the first injection. Calcium levels can be transiently elevated within the 6 hours after injection. If
But do we do it? I've never done it.
No,
in
no.
any-
If hypercalcemia develops, oral calcium intake should be reduced by 50% and serum calcium should be repeated. If a persistent hypercalcemia, calcium supplement should be stopped, and discontinuation of teriparatide is rarely needed in these patients.
Have you ever checked calcium? I mean, before initiation, I have checked calcium.
Yes.
But once I've put somebody on teriparatide, I've never bothered checking it again. Do you do it for follow-up?
I do during the first few follow-ups, add a calcium to the test just to see if
Okay.
hypercalcemia is there or not. But I
Okay.
don't check it within a day or two. I've never done it.
Okay.
So if hypercalcemia is suspected, we have to check for the other causes of the hypercalcemia, like hyperparathyroid, malignancy, sarcoidosis, and hydrochlorothiazide drugs should be checked. Coming to the radiology, X-ray spine annually, particularly for the patient with new onset or worsening of the back pain. Those patients who are on bisphosphonate therapy, complaining of thigh pain, should undergo a radiograph of the upper femur to rule out the cortical break. And suspected osteonecrosis of the jaw should be undergo CT of the jaw in long-term treatment. Coming to the calcium and vitamin D supplementations used as an adjunct to osteoporosis therapy, in a meta-analysis that compared calcium and vitamin D with the placebo, there is no significant effect on the reduction in the risk of vertebral or hip fractures, but a 37% of reduction in the risk of non-vertebral fractures when we give alone calcium and vitamin D. Coming to the BMD, latest.
Sorry, Ravi. Sorry. So my question is, coming back to our thing about wrist fracture.
Yes, sir.
Somebody who had only wrist fracture, no spine, no hip, would we put them all on calcium and vitamin D?
Yes, sir. We can try, sir, based on the age.
See, I mean, obviously somebody with Colles fracture, what Dharmanand was explaining earlier. So should we actually put everybody on calcium and vitamin D?
What is hesitancy, Ravi? You should say yes. Why not?
So the least you can do is adequate calcium, vitamin D.
And yes, sir.
Ensure adequate. So there is no indication for other therapies. That's all.
And what is the most powerful stimulant for cortical bone formation? Exercises, weight-bearing exercises. So what we do is make sure that vitamin D. I focus more on vitamin D. I'm little jittery about giving too much of calcium because one is it is constipating. A lot of people don't tolerate it. It interferes with the absorption of so many other molecules. And also there are some data to say that there is a slight increased risk of cardiovascular mortality. So though that study was questioned, but I'm little jittery because calcium supplement industry is too strong. They might be suppressing the facts. So my focus will be on increasing the optimizing the vitamin D and give a small dose of calcium and encourage them physical activity. And that would at least keep the bone strong and keep them on a close BMD monitoring. Maybe a year or two, we can repeat the BMD to see whether they are developing osteoporosis in other region, which requires intervention.
Okay. Coming to the BMD, latest Endocrine Society guidelines suggest monitoring of the BMD by DEXA at the spine and hip every 1 to 3 years to assess the treatment response. In Indian scenario, repeating DEXA every 1 to 2 years is recommended. An increase in BMD above the least significant change with a treatment is good and is associated with a greater reduction in the fracture risk than a stable BMD. Changes in the lumbar spine BMD are more robust, while those at the hip are less dramatic, and irrespective of the treatment modalities what we used. A stable BMD on treatment is also an acceptable endpoint.
Why? I've already answered it, I think.
Yes, sir.
The last question. Last sentence you used, no?
So changes
The
in
lumbar spine is more robust, while those at the hips are less dramatic, irrespective of treatment.
Because of the cortical bone.
So that you should remember. What is formed nicely and which can be shown and detected nicely is a trabecular bone increase. Okay, go ahead.
A stable BMD on treatment is also an acceptable endpoint. Loss of BMD beyond the LSC, usually 5% in lumbar and 4% hip and 5% in the femoral neck over the 2 years, suggests a treatment failure. Two or more
So it's exactly what I said, because FIT trial, fracture intervention trial of Alendronate, the primary endpoint was at 2 years. That's right.
Yes. 2 or more fractures, especially vertebral fractures, while on therapy also constitutes a treatment failure. These are the bone turnover markers. According to the International Osteoporosis Foundation, it is an alternative way to identify poor response or non-adherence to therapy. There are 3 markers that we can see. That is a serum type 1 collagen C telopeptide and serum procollagen type 1 N propeptide and urinary N telopeptides. These can be used to evaluate patient adherence and drug response to anti-reabsorptive therapies. Measurements suggested at a baseline 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months after starting of the treatment. A decrease in the CTX by at least 30% or by at least 100 nanogram per L from the pre-treatment value is expected in patients on anti-reabsorptive therapies. And PINP, a threshold of more than 20% or more than 10 microgram per liter from baseline is considered to be a significant change after the treatment. And the monitoring, because of the diurnal variations, higher turnover in their morning and the effect of the food decreases absorption. So sample should be collected in all these patients in the fasting state. Coming to the drug holiday, it proposed to potentially reduce the
problem is we don't do a baseline CTX.
Yes.
So one of the if at all you plan to use this for follow-up, it may not be a bad idea to ask for a CTX at baseline. At least we know what was the baseline. After bisphosphonate, it should be suppressed.
Yes, sir.
So it should be suppressed. So if it is not getting suppressed, that means the compliance is poor or drug is not working for some reason. And that also can be used for determining the drug holidays also, when to restart the medicine. I think we'll come to
Yes,
that.
sir.
I think.
Yes. Coming to the drug holiday, it proposed to potentially reduce the incidence of the rare adverse events associated with long-term use of anti-reabsorptive therapies. Coming to the Endocrine Society Guidelines 2020, bisphosphonates fracture risk need to be evaluated after 3 to 5 years. Those who are on zoledronic acid every 3 years or on oral every 5 years, we have to check for the BMDs. And patient with high risk and very high risk of fractures, like high risk fractures are the prior spine or hip fractures, or BMD T score at a hip or spine minus 2.5 or below, or 10 years frac score is more than 3%, and major osteoporotic fracture more than 20%. In patient with high risk and very high risk, they are not deemed to eligible for the drug holiday. In patients on denosumab therapy, fracture risk need to be evaluated in 5 to 10 years. So low risk is a no prior hip or spine fracture. BMD score at a hip or spine is minus 1.0 and above, and 10 years hip fracture risk is less than 3%. In the low risk and moderate risk, we can give a drug holiday can be considered in low moderate risk patients following a course of bisphosphonate with fracture risk being re-evaluated after every 1 to 3 years. Temporary discontinuation of for up to 5 years, reassess the fracture risk at 2 to 4 years intervals and consider reinitiating osteoporosis therapy earlier than 5 years if there is any decline in the BMD. This is the overall flowchart for a patient with postmenopausal female, that how we have to start on the treatment. Patient can be categorized to low risk, low to moderate risk, and high risk and very high risk patients. Those patients with high risk and very high risk, we can start them on bisphosphonate, denosumab, and teriparatide with supplementation of calcium and vitamin D. These patients, those who are on bisphosphonate, they have to recheck for the drug holiday for 5 years and 3 years. And those on denosumab and teriparatide, we can, for teriparatide, for up to 2 years, we can give the treatment. And after 2 years, we have to convert them to anti-obstructive medications. And denosumab reassess the fracture risk after 5 to 10 years. The above patients, those who are not tolerated to bisphosphonate, denosumab, they can be considered like in for the based on the age. If the age is more than 60 years, they can be considered on selective estrogen replacement therapy. And those who are less than 60 years and less than 10 years of past menopause and low venous thromboembolic risk. Uh, in those patients with vasomotor symptoms, hormonal therapy can be considered. And those without no vasomotor symptoms and high risk of breast cancer, selective estrogen receptor modulators like raloxifene and bezoxifene can be considered. And there is just I'm giving a brief about the medications of all the thing. And the bisphosphonates, ibandronate is not recommended to reduce the non-vertebral or hip fracture risk. Coming to the overall bisphosphonates, alendronate, risendronate, zoledronic acid, and ibandronate. So all alendronate, risendronate, zoledronic acid has a vertebral fracture reduction, hip fracture reduction or more. Whereas ibandronate, vertebral fracture reduction studies are there. It is useful. Whereas in hip fracture and non-vertebral fracture, there is no studies and a very limited data. This is the bisphosphonates meta-analysis comparing the old. This is compared with the drug is compared with the placebo. They reassess the fracture risk, fractures at the vertebra, hip, and non-vertebral fractures. Out of all the bisphosphonates, zoledronic acid is like more potent in vertebral and hip and non-vertebral fractures. Benefits and harm. Oral, when we are starting on an oral, check for the GI irritation. These adverse effects can be minimized by careful adherence to correct dosing and procedure. We have to advise the patient to take the medication early morning in the empty stomach and sit upright for at least 1 hour with a 250 ml of water.
They need not sit upright. They have to be up and about. If you say sit upright, there's poor things, they will take the tablet and sit in the chair, waiting, looking at their watch for 30-40 minutes. So they can be up and about, can do anything. They can do their morning chore. They can prepare do their kitchen work. So you have to be a little careful what you tell. Right? And for patients, some of the patients follow it so religiously that they will be sitting and waiting, looking at the clock.
Coming to the IV injection, IV zoledronic acid, when we acute phase reactions like flu-like symptoms are more, and pyrexia and myalgias are occur. Out of 1 in 4 patients, they have the flu-like symptoms, but usually only after the first infusion, and that lasts for 1 to 7 days. So atrial fibrillation is one of the most risk factor, and patient with who are starting on zoledronic acid may have modestly increased this risk, but not other bisphosphonates. So basic ECG to be done before starting any zoledronic acid infusion to check for the atrial fibrillation. Coming to the long-term side effect of the bisphosphonates are the osteonecrosis of the jaw. That is a non-healing wound in the oral mucosa with exposed bone that lasts for more than 8 weeks, usually associated with an invasive dental procedure. So higher dose and more frequent use of bisphosphonates and denosumab has been associated with these greater risks. Patient on long-term oral therapy, the risk has been reported to be as high as 21 in 10,000 for patients on more than 4 years of therapy. Tooth extraction in patient exposed to bisphosphonate therapy carries a 0.5% risk of development of osteonecrosis of jaw. So American Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons recommend a 2-month drug holiday for those who have taken more than 4 years of bisphosphonates. Atypical femoral fracture. This is the other second complication that we get with long-term bisphosphonates. Is the insufficiency stress fracture of the femoral shaft, first noticed in case reports 2007, suggested a possible association with bisphosphonate use. Patient present with pain or aching in the thigh or groin with or after weight-bearing activities. So these patient X-ray femur should be done. In whose the bisphosphonates are contraindicated, mostly in patients with esophageal disorders or inability to follow dosing requirements, or patients with glomerular filtration rate less than 30, and patients who underwent bariatric surgeries. These are the oral are contraindicated most. Teriparatide, multiple vertebral fractures, teriparatide or abaloparatide for up to 2 years, followed by an anti-reabsorptive treatment. In the meta-analysis, hip fracture reduction for both agents were not statistically significant because of that one. And increase in the osteosarcoma in rats given lifelong treatment with either of the drug lead to the black box warning for the use to up to maximum 24 months.
I was told today by one of the representative. I don't know how to verify it. I was trying to get into internet and look for it, and he said that the Fortios black box warning has been removed by FDA recently. So that could be good news. And they say it may use it beyond 24 hours. That's what the medical representative said. So that's not science, but we have to look at the evidence.
Okay. Side effects for the teriparatide is a dizziness and leg cramps, whereas abaloparatide is a nausea, postural hypotension, dizziness, palpitations, and headache. Hypercalcemia, as we explained, serum calcium should be assessed prior to the use. And selective estrogen receptor modulators is a raloxifene and bezodoxifene to reduce the risk of the vertebral fractures. Patient characteristics are those who are at low risk of DVT and high risk of the breast cancers. In these patients, we can select SERM. Menopausal hormone therapy and tibolone, using estrogen only in women with hysterectomy under 60 years and less than 10 years past menopause and low risk of DVT, and bisphosphonate or denosumab are not appropriate with the bothersome of vasomotor symptoms. In those patients, we can consider for the menopause hormonal therapy. No prior MI or stroke should be there, and no breast cancer. Coming to the denosumab, recommendation dose is a 60 mg subcutaneous every 6 months. The bone remodeling and reflected in bone turnover markers reverse after 6 months if the drug is not taken on scheduled day. Fracture risk reassessed after 5 to 10 years, and the no published data on the use of denosumab beyond 10 years of the treatment. Benefits and harms is a hypocalcemia, which we can expect with the denosumab, and malabsorption in CKD patient. In those patients, hypocalcemia is more prominent, and drug lowers the bone turnover rapidly and blocks calcium metabolism from the bone in defense of hypocalcemia. So clinical monitoring of the serum levels of calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus should be considered in patients predisposed to hypocalcemia and disturbances in the mineral balance within 14 days of the injection. Administered to the patient with CKD also it is visible, and cessation of therapy may be associated with risk of multiple vertebral fractures. Injection should be given within 6 months, with 6 months plus or minus 1 month. If longer interval between the dose, drug effects wear off and bone reabsorption rate rises promptly, and bone turnovers increases to pre-treatment levels are higher. BMD declines by 18 to 24 months after the treatment discontinuation. Coming to the steroid and osteoporosis, in patients with long-term glucocorticoids, induced bone loss should be treated aggressively. Men and postmenopausal women, bisphosphonate as the first-line therapy. We prefer alendronate or resendronate as the first line because of the clinical trial data, glucocorticoid-induced osteoporosis, and not able to tolerate oral adherence difficulties. In those patients, we can consider zoledronic acid as an acceptable alternative. The remaining ibandronate has a less studies in steroid-induced osteoporosis. Sir.
Good. So fairly a decent summary.
Is one small adverse effect that you forgot about bisphosphonate, just to be aware, along with fever, chills, and such thing, uveitis is described following bisphosphonate. Okay. So
Yes, sir.
acute uveitis, if any of your patients get, don't be surprised. So the treatment would be only topical, like what the ophthalmologist would give. It will resolve.
So there is one small, this one is a REMS that is for the diagnosis of osteoporosis in a European multi-center clinical context. This is to replace the DEXA scan, sir. They are doing the echo scan, ecographic multi spectrometry. That the full data of this, I didn't get it. So
There are a lot of there are better methods to diagnose osteoporosis. Even the what is that X-ray?
Dual
What's it?
energy, dual
dual energy.
energy
Yeah.
CT.
So that is actually better than DEXA to assess the osteoporosis, because it also measures the size of the vertebra and also morphology of the vertebra. So all these things are measured. It gives a much better information, but involves a lot of radiation at this moment. There are a lot of studies here and there. So the current recommendation based on the available data, which also included heavily health economics. Health economics is also included, and long-term safety. So this is a reasonable guidelines at this moment. I think in future definitely we'll see better and easier measurements to assess the osteoporosis and the response to treatment. So at this moment, what you have presented is the state of the art at this moment. But a lot of ultrasound based, echo based, CT based, low dose CT based technologies are being developed. So hope.
Somebody else. Ravi, we have asked enough questions. Tanmay, is it there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Ravi talked a lot about rheumatoid arthritis. Which other rheumatological disease that you see in the clinic you'll be sort of seeing a sort of a different type of fragility fracture?
Sir, lupus patient.
Okay, that is corticosteroid, primarily corticosteroid
Yes,
induced,
yes, sir.
Disease related.
disease related. Which other patient? One is rheumatoid.
Rheumatoid. Yes, sir.
There's a lot of
Uh,
talk osteoporosis in this particular disease.
yes, sir.
How do you
Ankylosing
manage?
spondylitis.
Yes. Ankylosing spondylitis.
Yes.
So ankylosing spondylitis, how do you manage, how do you diagnose osteoporosis and ankylosing spondylitis? Can DEXA scan be used?
Sir,
What is the problem in using DEXA scan in ankylosing spondylitis?
so because of new bone formation, it will give faulty results.
Yeah.
It may give
So
faulty results.
spinal osteoporosis is not easy to measure in ankylosing spondylitis because of new bone formation.
Yes, sir.
DEXA scan may give you a false normal value. Okay.
Yes.
One of the risk factors in ankylosing spondylitis is low trauma causing spinal fractures. What is the treatment? What would you do to ankspond? They're at a risk.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? How would you treat?
So lateral DEXA, there's another modality of investigation. Not very
Yeah.
sure if many centers have it, sir, but
Yeah, lateral DEXA can be done by most of the machines. People do have it. Earlier, they used to give routinely, because we clinicians told that we are not going to use them. Then they have stopped using. So it can be used. One of the ways to assess osteoporosis in ankylosing spondylitis, because it to a certain extent it reduces the interference by osteophytes and syndesmophytes.
yes.
Is
So
there any
treating the
treatment?
disease itself would be uh, an option in spa patients, because we usually don't give them anti-resorptive or teriparatide. Uh,
Exactly the question I asked. What would you do to treat?
So to control the disease, sir, if we find, I mean, because finding itself in a very long-standing ankylosing spondylitis would be a difficult, because since the DEXA would be false negative.
Yeah, yeah.
So
See, DEXA cannot be used anyway. See, we know that osteoporotic fractures occur in those with these fused spines, those who have, because one, the spinal immobility enhances bone loss. One of the big things is the spinal immobility itself enhances bone loss. In
yes,
addition to your rank pathways, all those things. So, how would you treat these patients? Has anybody treated? Have you seen?
sir, like what we have seen in the OPD here is Anderson's lesions, the spinal fracture as a in a long-standing SPA patient.
Hmm.
And they have been treated with immobilization. Like also, they give a brace only if it's stable. If it is unstable, then they go for surgery because definitely that they need surgery for that. And then good course of NSAIDs. And if the pain is still persistent, then very rarely, so there are some case reports on anti-TNF being used. But I'm not very aware of osteoporotic fracture treatment in
Ankles.
thanks.
So the data is really sparse. Nobody knows actually what to do.
Yes.
We do give sometimes bisphosphonates because there is some data on bisphosphonates in ankylosing spondylitis itself as a treatment. So we know
Yes,
that
sir.
it's not very harmful. So I
Yes.
would give, and if
So
somebody has already
which one
what
do you prefer, sir? Like in
zoledronic acid,
Zorantic acid.
pamidronate was tried as a treatment.
Yes, sir.
That has to be repeated every few months.
Yes.
So this is once a year. I have given, but I don't know whether this really makes a difference or not. We don't know at this moment.
So here they do give, we do give, sir, pamidronate or hydrophos IV shot in
Yes,
30 seconds. So
yes.
some patients it does help here.
Like,
So
we don't know whether the data about whether it really prevents the fracture. I don't know, but we do give
yes.
bisphosphonates.
I've given it to people with Angspond with fractures, especially those where surgery is not required. Um, Surgery is only required in those who have through and through fractures with retropulsion of the vertebrae causing spinal compression. Otherwise, you generally don't, because even surgery in Angspond is not easy. The moment they put all the screws and plates, everything will keep falling off because the bones are porotic.
Yes.
So, one important thing is make sure that your spinal surgeon doesn't unnecessarily do surgery in ankylosing spondylitis. Unless there is a cord compression, don't refer your patients for a spinal intervention. What I have found useful is definitely bisphosphonate. The last couple of patients who had spinal fractures who did not need surgery, I gave them, as Dharmanand said, I've given them Zolendronate, and at least the bone pain has gone. And then lifestyle advice about fall prevention, wearing seat belt, preventing whiplash injury, especially when they're traveling, so that hyperextension is avoided. All those lifestyle advice I have given. Um, one or two patients I put them on oral bisphosphonates, but I don't know how to monitor them. But Zolendronate I have given for somebody who had bad fracture. I have given it actually for 3 years also.
Ramesh, we could probably do a CTX baseline and one zoledronic acid, and after 2-3 months and see whether it is suppressed. At least we know that something is working inside.
Good idea.
Sir, one we have given to our patients, sir, from Mysore, Dharmanand, sir, you have given for ankylosing spondylitis lady with
Yeah,
Mysore,
yeah, yeah.
30 years female, I think, sir. With kids, she used to come.
What
We do
uh,
give.
what is the treatment for premenopausal women with osteoporosis? Say lupus patient who has been on steroids, and somebody does a bone density and you find that the bone density is very low, -3, -3.5, premenopausal. What do you do?
So for steroid-induced osteoporosis, we can, like females, bisphosphonates, I will choose the first option, sir. That to alendronate,
What for premenopausal?
Ramesh, you have to tell the age. 47 premenopausal, I'll still use salendramet. But that
Yeah.
30-year-old girl, you have to think about twice about giving it.
So I won't choose the hormonal replacement therapy in these patients. There is a risk of the strokes. So
Yeah, I mean, if they're perimenopausal, yes, you can give. There is no data to support giving bisphosphonates to premenopausal women is going to help. But then I've occasionally had a lupus patient who has developed severe osteoporosis because of steroid use. The most important thing is to try to get the steroid dose as less as possible and see if we can treat lupus with a lot of other agents other than using steroids. Maintain the calcium and vitamin D, look at other modifiable risk factors. If nothing has worked and if they don't have plans of having children, I have given bisphosphonate. But this is arbitrary. Oral bisphosphonates. Anything else? Anybody has any other question? Okay.
Okay, sir.
I think we shall we close?
Yes, sir.
thank you, sir.
Yes.
Well
Good.
done,
Well
Ravi.
done. Well done, Ravi. Well done,
Yes, sir.
Ravi.
Thank you,
Good,
sir.
good.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
sir.